Hi, I'm Frank Cottrell Boyce, and I wrote a book called Cosmic, which is the story of the adventures of a boy called Liam. And the best adventure stories are stories about people who've been places and done things that no one else has done. And Liam is a boy who leads a group of children on an expedition into space, and indeed out of Earth's orbit all the way to the moon. So that makes it a pretty big adventure in my book. I had the idea for the character of Liam a long time before I knew what adventures he was going to have. Liam's based on a real person. He's a friend of my son's. One summer we went away for the summer. When we came back, this boy had had a huge growing spurt, and he knocked on the door, and it was like this boom, 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 knock on the door. And when we opened the door, there was this huge mutant version of this boy standing in the doorway, because he's had this humongous growing spurt, and he really didn't look like a little boy anymore. In the space of one summer, he had suddenly become someone who looked like a grown-up, and that started me thinking, what would that be like? What would it be like if you were 12 years old, but you could pass yourself off as a grown-up? What adventures would you have? And eventually I thought of the adventure of going to space. Liam doesn't have huge kind of adventure hero abilities. He's not Percy Jackson, he's not a god, he's not Harry Potter, he doesn't have magic powers. The only difference between Liam and other children is that he's taller than they are. That's all there is to it. But what makes him a hero, I think, is that he rises to the challenge of that. This thing happens to him, he has this big growing spurt, and he makes the most of it. He uses that as his golden ticket to adventures. What stories influenced Cosmo? There are lots of old, really ancient fairy stories about people changing places, about old people becoming young or young people becoming old, and obviously they were a huge influence on the book. Then the real story, the real boy, our friend who had this huge growing spurt, he was a big influence too. But I think the most noticeable, the single biggest influence was Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is one of my favourite books, and it's the story of a boy who enters this competition to have this fabulous thing, this trip around a chocolate factory. And a very similar thing happens in Cosmic. Liam enters a competition to go to space. Just another great big kind of wish story. Where will Liam be in 10 years' time? That's a really great question, because of course, what do you do after you've been to the moon? All the Apollo astronauts who went to the moon in the 70s, they found it quite hard to adjust to ordinary life after that. And lots of them assumed that they would be going to the moon or even further again. It was really hard to adjust to life without the excitement of space travel. And I think Liam would have that problem as well. But maybe times have changed, and maybe now we're beginning a new cycle of space exploration. So maybe Liam would be lucky where those astronauts weren't. So I would like to think that in 10 years' time, Liam would be on Mars. He would be on Mars in a little house on Mars and thinking about going to Saturn maybe.